Hey guys, it's Pastor Stephen here. I just wanted to share some thoughts on an article that came out of Desiring God, which is a great resource. I'm not really talking down upon the ministry or anything like that, but they re-released an article that they had released in whenever President Trump was elected in 2017, probably January. So it's about 2 years old, and it talks about, what do we do now that we have someone who's not morally qualified to be president in the White House. And of course, I think a lot of Christians are scratching their heads with this article, and it was written by Pastor John Piper, who, again, I respect. I think he has a lot of good resources out there. I think that, for the most part, his theology is pretty stand up. There may be some things that I disagree with, but, if you look at most of these guys, you can probably pinpoint something that you disagree with. There are probably better resources out there than people that I more align with than him. But let me just talk about it for just a second. So what is his stance? He believes that because President Trump has said and done certain things in his personal life, had several marriages, may or may not have slept with a porn star, that he may have made payments about it, that he said something on a bus, that he is not qualified because of those things. He's just too immoral to be president. And, might come back to that, and to a lot of Christians who, believe, oh yeah, he's just not qualified, and it would have been better to go, I guess, the other route, which was Hillary for president. But nevertheless, let's take on that argument a little bit and say, does that line up biblically with what we would believe as Christians? And I just look at David in the Bible, right? And you look at David, and this was a guy that was considered a man after God's own heart. This was a guy selected by God, right? If we remember the story, of course, David was not the strongest or the most qualified, of course, by human standards, but actually he was by God's standards, right? And so he ends up being a really great king, right? But he has some struggles, and he struggles with the ladies, right? He sees Bathsheba bathing, and we know the story. He commits adultery, he lies, he commits murder to cover it up. But yet he's still considered and looked up to as David, the man after God's own heart, because of God's grace and mercy. So what was the point of what I'm saying? Is that God used him despite his flaws, despite his immorality. He was not morally qualified to be leader. God qualified him. God ordained him to be such. God willed it. And so whenever we talk about President Trump, this is a man who God has placed into the presidency. Now, of course, we also have to accept, if we really understand God's will, that he also willed for President Obama to be president as well. And all the previous presidents, nothing happens by accident. And God has his own purposes for doing each thing. But to say, oh, well, President Trump, he's unqualified, he can't possibly do well. Now, many people will say, well, he's not David either, we don't know his relationship with God. And my ultimate thing to say to that is, again, are we going to mourn over what David has done? Are we all sitting around going, oh man, overall I have a bad viewpoint of David because, he did those things, that lying, murderous adulterer, he doesn't, he has a bad view in my mind. So I ask you that question, for those never Trumpers out there who say, well, you know what, it's just disgusting that man is our president. Well, you know what? What's disgusting is what came out earlier this week in New York, where you can now have an abortion up till birth. That's disgusting. And how about the fact that President Trump, because God has ordained it to be so, has picked already 2 Supreme Court picks and maybe picking a third in his first term? That's amazing. And some of the things that he has done, whether or not you think he may personally be a Christian or whatever, he has done good, more good for Christians around this nation than several administrations. That's all I'll say. And so I want to throw that out there. I think it is disappointing, some of the things that John Piper has said. And again, that doesn't mean I would never, ever listen to him. Doesn't mean I'm not one of these people that, oh, I'm so offended that I'm not going to ever go to your website again. I'm going to get over it. I'm going to still use resources that I think are good, articles that can encourage me, But it is rather interesting that he has that perspective, and I just very much disagree with his viewpoint. He also recently came out with climate change, saying that is a wrath of God. And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking to myself, research into climate change, and really look at some of what these scientists have said. And perhaps I should make this in another video. But look, the truth of the matter about climate change is, they said that if carbon dioxide levels were to double, right, that would only influence the overall temperature of the Earth by 1 degree. Okay, so apparently since the Industrial Revolution, carbon dioxide levels have risen, and it's risen by like 40% or something like that. So that would mean that maybe temperatures have risen half a degree. So maybe man-made global warming is only a small little picture out of thousands of factors. It's really hard to know what influences, but I do know this: God influences, and he's the overall person. And so those are two things about John Piper. And again, I'm not really saying it as, oh, you should never listen to this guy, but I would say this: well, just be cautious and aware, and just realize that pastors and teachers out there, they are people. They're normal people, right? And some of them have dedicated a lot of their lives in studying the Word, but that doesn't mean that sometimes personal opinions or wrong things aren't said, and sometimes they have to be corrected. And we can still love those people, encourage those people. There's no way that everybody can just be 100% right all the time. Okay? So let that encourage you. I'm not telling you to never use his website again or never listen to him again, but I just wanted to share those thoughts and put this out there that, we need to be encouraging and praying for our president, and we need to be thankful that God placed him there as believers. That's just my opinion, and I think that Christians are entitled to that. We don't have to view him, President Trump, as this person that's unqualified. Because you know what? If we're going to hold that to that standard, then David's not qualified. If we're going to hold to that standard, then nobody but Jesus is qualified for that position, and we just don't have it. Okay? And that's another debate. All right? So y'all have a great day.